Imagine a country innovating and building 10 brand new toys every single second.
Right.
10 new products designed, engineered, and manufactured in the time it takes you to just take a breath.
It's an incredible scale.
It sounds like an absolute manufacturing miracle. But here is the paradox. The very workforce building them is actually shrinking.
Yeah.
And a huge portion of those workers are, retreating back to agriculture. So today, your mission is to understand exactly how that happens. We're looking at the 10-year report card of the Make in India initiative.
Launched on September 25th, 2014. Yeah.
Exactly. And listen, if you are prepping for a major policy exam or, walking into a boardroom to pitch an investment strategy, you cannot just look at the gleaming glass facade of export numbers.
No, absolutely not.
You have to understand the mechanics of how a nation attempts to shift from a massive importer to an absolute strategic global hub.
Exactly. And to understand those mechanics, you really have to look at the foundational blueprint.
Yeah.
I mean, why 2014? That year was a critical historical trigger. The government was looking at this massive demographic wave, millions of young people entering the workforce every single year.
And the traditional manufacturing sector was completely stagnating at that point.
Completely.
Yeah.
And if you don't build an economic engine to absorb that youth bulge, well, your demographic dividend rapidly turns into a demographic disaster.
It becomes a huge liability.
Right. So the government laid down 3 non-negotiable core objectives to anchor this entire policy framework. Listen, if you are taking notes, these are the targets you absolutely must commit to memory.
Okay, lay them out.
Target 1, raise manufacturing sector growth to an aggressive 12 to 14% every single year.
Got it.
Target 2, create 100 million additional jobs by 2022 to absorb that youth demographic.
Right.
And target 3, push the manufacturing sector's contribution to the national GDP up to 25% by the year 2025.
Okay, let's unpack this. I want to isolate that last metric because that is the anchor for everything we are going to discuss today in this deep dive. 25% of GDP by 2025.
Yeah.
Because that isn't just a slight bump in factory output, that is the mathematical threshold for a complete structural economic transformation.
It is. And the scale of this ambition was immense right from day one. I mean, it started by targeting 25 specific sectors.
Like automobiles, textiles, right?
Exactly. Automobiles, electronics, pharmaceuticals, defense, renewable energy. And now, operating in what is essentially the Making India 2.0 phase, that scope is actually expanded to 27 sectors.
Wow.
The strategic intent wasn't just to build things. It was to modernize infrastructure / bureaucratic red tape to, attract foreign direct investment and fundamentally rewire the nation's global competitiveness.
But, setting a 25% target doesn't magically build a factory.
No, it doesn't.
So let's push the analysis forward. How do you actually execute something this massive? Like, if you're a government, how do you convince multinational corporations to move their supply chains to your shores?
Right.
We really need to break down the actual policy and institutional engines driving this blueprint.
You have to look at the government's response framework as a series of interconnected operational engines. So the most critical engine is finance and policy, specifically the production-linked incentive, or PLI schemes.
Okay, the PLI. I hear this everywhere.
Right, and it is crucial to understand how a PLI works. In the past, governments might give a company an upfront subsidy to build a factory, just hoping they produce something.
Yeah, a blank check, basically.
Exactly. A PLI flips that entirely. It is a performance bonus. The government gives you a financial reward only after you have manufactured and actually sold the goods.
Oh, wow. That's smart.
Yeah, it covers 14 key sectors. And by July 2024, this outcome-based mechanism alone drew roughly 1.23 lakhs crore in investment.
Wait, hold on. Let me translate that for our global listeners. 1.23 lakh crore rupees is roughly 15 billion US dollars.
Right.
And it generated about 8 lakhs, so 800,000 jobs.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. You can incentivize all the high-tech factories you want with these performance bonuses, but if it takes a truck 3 weeks to cross the country because of terrible roads, well, those goods are useless.
Completely useless.
Your global competitiveness is zero. So how did they solve the physical bottleneck?
That is exactly where the infrastructure and governance engine comes in. Specifically, this massive program called PM Gati Shakti.
Gati Shakti.
Right, which essentially translates to the power of speed.
Right.
It is a master logistical blueprint targeting a $5 trillion economy by 2025.
Okay.
Historically, infrastructure in India was built in silos. The road department didn't talk to the rail department.
Right, a total nightmare.
Exactly. Gati Shakti integrates 7 primary engines: railways, roads, ports, waterways, airports, mass transport, and logistics infrastructure.
It's all connected.
Yes, the goal is multimodal connectivity. If a smartphone is assembled in a facility in the south, it needs seamless rail-to-port connectivity so it can be exported globally within days, not weeks.
Makes perfect sense. So we have the financial incentives to build and the physical infrastructure to move the goods.
Right.
But what about the digital layer? Because you can't have a modern manufacturing hub without a massive technological backbone.
Precisely. And the technology engine is really fascinating here. First, you have the Semicon India program from 2021.
Okay, semiconductors.
Right, which is a highly strategic play to build a domestic semiconductor and display ecosystem. Because you cannot be a global manufacturing hub if you are completely reliant on importing foreign microchips.
Yeah, you're dead in the water.
But, the more surprising technological engine is actually the Unified Payments Interface, or UPI.
A payments app. Wait, how does a digital payment system connect to heavy manufacturing?
Because UPI formalized the informal economy. It is currently processing a staggering 46% of all global real-time payment transactions.
46%
Yeah.
globally.
Globally. When you bring millions of small vendors, suppliers, and logistics providers into a formal digital framework,
Yeah.
they suddenly become visible to the banking sector.
Oh, I see.
Right? They can get credit. They can seamlessly integrate into the supply chains of those massive PLI-backed factories.
That's brilliant.
Couple that with the regulatory engine things like the Goods and Services Tax, or GST, which replace this fragmented state-by-state tax nightmare with a single unified national market.
Right, so suddenly moving parts across state lines isn't a logistical nightmare anymore.
Exactly. What's fascinating here is how initiatives like Startup India fit in. It isn't just about funding software apps. It is a cultural rewiring to turn a massive population from job seekers into job creators.
Right, but this raises an important question, though. We really need to elevate this from pure economics to the threat matrix.
Okay, yeah.
Because if you look at global geopolitics over the last 5 years, you cannot separate economic capability from national security.
No, you can't.
How does this domestic manufacturing infrastructure translate into border implications, supply chain resilience, and ultimately absolute strategic autonomy?
The defense and strategic angle is actually the ultimate litmus test for Atmanirbhar Bharat, which, translates to a self-reliant India.
Right.
10 years ago, India was heavily characterized as the world's largest arms importer. Make in India fundamentally shifted that by utilizing these positive indigenization lists.
Meaning what exactly?
They literally banned the import of thousands of defense components, forcing the domestic industry to innovate and build them at home.
Wow, just ban them outright.
Yeah. And the civil-military applications of that are profound. We are now seeing indigenous fighter jets, submarines, and aircraft carriers. The statistics completely validate this shift.
Let's hear the numbers.
In the 2023-24 financial year, domestic defense production hit a record 1.27 lakh crore rupees, over $15 billion. And crucially, India is now exporting defense equipment to over 90 countries.
90 countries.
Yeah. Going from a massive net importer to exporting to 90 nations, that is the very definition of strategic autonomy.
And we saw that exact same autonomy activated during global crises, didn't we? Like when global supply chains completely collapsed.
Absolutely. The COVID-19 pandemic was a severe stress test for global supply chain vulnerability. If you rely entirely on external supply chains, your citizens are at a massive risk.
Yeah.
India's response was massive indigenous vaccine production. They not only covered their own population, but eventually supplied nearly 60% of the world's vaccines.
Which translates domestic manufacturing capability into massive global diplomatic standing.
Exactly. And we see parallel strategic dividends in technology. The electronics sector has exploded to $155 billion by FY23.
Wow.
Mobile phones account for 43% of this, making India the second largest mobile manufacturer globally.
That's huge.
And look at energy security, which is so vital for climate resilience. Renewable energy capacity has surged from about 76 gigawatts in the 2014 to an impressive 203.1 gigawatts in 2024.
Okay, so those are the victories. And they are absolutely massive. But here's where it gets really interesting.
Yeah.
Because in any rigorous policy analysis, you cannot afford to be blinded by the highlight reel.
Right.
If we look at the 10-year report card, Despite all the milestones in defense, electronics, renewables, there are some glaring red marks.
Yeah.
We have to run a critical evaluation layer. What are the structural frictions actually limiting this blueprint?
This is where we confront the reality check.
Yeah.
And, if you were analyzing this for an exam or drafting an executive brief, this is exactly where you show your depth.
Let's get into it.
Let's start with the GDP trap. We established the memory anchor right at the start. The goal was 25% of GDP by 2025.
Right, the non-negotiable target.
The reality.
Yeah.
As of the 2022-23 financial year, the manufacturing sector's contribution is stuck at approximately 17%.
Wow.
It has effectively stagnated for a decade. Next, analyze the investment gap. The government set a highly publicized target to attract $100 billion in manufacturing investment by 2025.
And what's the actual number?
As of 2023, the reality is only about $23 billion achieved.
Wait, hold on. You're telling me the goal was 25% of GDP by 2025, but we're stuck at 17%?
Yeah.
And investment is roughly a quarter of what was projected. That sounds like a major structural failure. What exactly went wrong there? Is it a lack of innovation?
Innovation is a huge part of it, yes. This is what we call the innovation deficit. India's research and development expenditure to GDP ratio sits at a dangerously low 0.7%.
2.7%.
Right. When you compare that to the global average of 1.8% or, the 2 to 3% spent by competing major economies, it becomes clear why moving up the value chain is so difficult.
But wait, let me push back on that. India has a wildly successful space program. I mean, they land rovers on the moon. How is the national R&D ratio only 0.7%?
Because that 0.7% is heavily skewed toward government-funded strategic sectors like space and defense.
Oh, I see.
The private sector in India historically hesitates to invest heavily in long-term R&D compared to companies in, say, the U.S. or China. They often prefer technology transfer agreements over raw, ground-up innovation.
That makes sense.
And this lack of deep private innovation raises an important question regarding human capital, which leads us to the most concerning metric of all, the job paradox.
This is the paradox I mentioned at the very beginning of the deep dive. The incredible output of toys and electronics versus the shrinking workforce.
Exactly. Remember the target of 100 million new jobs.
Yeah.
The data reveals that the growth in manufacturing output has not mirrored the growth in employment. According to national sample surveys, manufacturing employment actually declined from 12.6% of the workforce in 2011-12 down to 11.4% in 2022-23.
Well, it went down.
Yes. Concurrently, agriculture's share in the workforce actually increased from 42.5% to 45.8% over a similar period.
So output is increasing in high-tech sectors, but it's not absorbing the demographic dividend at all.
No.
Let me use an analogy here. It's like building a state-of-the-art, fully automated kitchen in the middle of a city. The kitchen produces Michelin star food. The output is incredible. The exports are off the charts.
Right.
But the kitchen only employs 3 technicians to run the robots, while the rest of the neighborhood, our demographic dividend, is left without work and has to go back to farming just to survive.
That is a perfect encapsulation. You are seeing high-tech, capital-intensive victories totally isolated within an ecosystem that just isn't generating mass employment.
And what's the root cause?
The root cause of this paradox is the capacity gap. According to the India Skills Report 2024, approximately 60% of the workforce in India lacks the relevant skills required for modern manufacturing jobs.
60%.
You cannot staff a highly automated PLI-driven microchip factory with workers whose primary experience is traditional, informal, manual labor.
You just can't.
And because the informal, unorganized sector still accounts for the vast majority of jobs in India, the workforce is trapped. This constraint is reflected in their global standing. As of 2023, India ranked 5th in the Global Manufacturing Index, trailing competitors like China and the USA.
Which is still good, but not number 1 or 2.
Exactly. Furthermore, despite all the focus on domestic production, India's exports as a share of GDP have actually fallen from 25.2% in 2013-14 down to 22.6% in 2024-25.
Okay, so we have the complete diagnosis now. We have incredible strategic victories in defense, vaccines, mobile assembly.
Yes.
But they are operating in an ecosystem struggling with an unskilled workforce, low private R&D, and sluggish foreign investment. We can't just leave it at the diagnosis, though.
No, we have to solve it.
Right. If you are drafting a policy brief, you need to generate the solution matrix. How do we engineer our way out of these structural gaps?
You apply this rigorous framework of institutional engineering. First, institutional strengthening and regulatory reform to aggressively close that investment gap. You have to make the ease of doing business not just a policy on paper, but an absolute reality on the factory floor.
Make it real.
Right. Second, recognizing the post-COVID vulnerabilities. There must be a relentless focus on the localization of deep-tier supply chains. It is not enough to just assemble mobile phones from imported parts. You have to manufacture the batteries, the screens, and the microchips locally.
Right, ground up.
Third, and most importantly, massive capacity building through public-private partnerships. The government and private corporations must co-invest in bridging that 60% skill development deficit.
Right, because if you don't upskill the workforce, that demographic dividend just sits there idle while the robots do all the work.
Precisely. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, we see what I call the interlinking engine of national policy. Making India cannot be viewed in isolation.
It's all connected.
It is a vital cog in digital India, evidenced by the synergy between the Semicon India initiative and the UPI infrastructure. It is deeply embedded in climate resilience, driving that massive 203 gigawatt renewable surge and fueling a rapidly expanding $3 billion electric vehicle market.
It's the connective tissue. Make in India, Digital India, Startup India. They aren't separate programs. They were just different chapters of the exact same book.
Exactly. When you analyze these components together, you see the roadmap for Viksit Bharat 2047, the vision for a fully developed India by its 100th year of independence.
Right.
It demonstrates that Make in India is not a one-off campaign. It is a recurring governance pattern aimed simultaneously at generating inclusive growth for the population and establishing absolute strategic autonomy on the world stage.
So what does this all mean for you? If you are stepping up to a podium tomorrow or, sitting down to write a high-stakes exam answer, how do you synthesize this massive download of data into a high-scoring brief?
If you're walking into that boardroom or exam hall tomorrow, here is your structural framework.
Okay, let's hear it.
Your introduction must clearly define the 10-year trajectory of Make in India as a deliberate shift from import dependence towards strategic autonomy.
Simple and powerful.
For the body of your analysis, you must present the dual narrative. You contrast the undeniable achievements in defense indigenization, electronic scaling, and global vaccine supply against the harsh structural challenges of the R&D deficit, the investment gap, and the employment paradox.
The reality check.
Right. And for your conclusion, prescribe targeted capacity building, specifically upskilling that 60% of the workforce, and deep supply chain localization to insulate the economy from global shocks.
That's perfect. Let's lock this in. Give them the 5 numbers and concepts they absolutely must have memorized before they walk in the door.
Here is your final revision capsule. 5 must-remember facts. 1. The PLI schemes generated 8 lakh jobs.
Got it.
2. Renewable energy capacity hit 203.1 gigawatts.
Check.
3. The private innovation bottleneck is defined by a dangerously low 0.7% R&D to GDP ratio.
Crucial point.
4. Manufacturing is structurally trapped at 17% of GDP, completely missing the 25% target.
Right.
And 5. The electronics sector proves the capability, scaling to $155 billion.
Okay, what about the exam question?
Here's the one probable exam question you should be prepared to answer. Critically evaluate the Make in India initiative's performance over the last decade, analyzing the dichotomy between technological milestones and employment realities.
That's a great question.
And finally, your 5 analytical keywords to deploy in your arguments: multimodal connectivity, strategic autonomy, demographic dividend, supply chain vulnerability, and Atmanirbhar Bharat.
That is your briefing. You now possess the blueprint, the operational metrics, the critical vulnerabilities, and the strategic solutions regarding a decade of the Make in India initiative.
You have the whole picture.
You are equipped to analyze not just what the policy achieved, but exactly why the structural frictions exist and how they connect to the broader architecture of global economic security. Keep looking critically at the infrastructure of ambition around you.
Absolutely.
But before you close your notes and head into your meeting, consider this final provocative thought.
Let's hear it.
If a nation can master the complexity of launching indigenous aircraft carriers and innovating 10 new toys every single second, but 60% of its workforce lacks the skills to participate in that modern economy, are we successfully building a high-tech ecosystem, or are we just building a fortress of innovation that leaves the demographic dividends standing outside the gates?